Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Book of Hedge Druidry, a complete guide for the solitary seeker, by Joanna van der Hoeven, narrated by Coleen Marlo. Publisher's note: this audiobook includes bonus material. Please visit tantor.com and type Book of Hedge Druidry into the search box. Follow the link to the book's page. Then, under the supplemental content section, please enter the access code PATH and then click the unlock button to access the bonus material. The code should be entered in all lowercase letters. All figures and tables referenced in this audiobook can be found in the bonus material. Disclaimer: the publisher and the author assume no liability for any injuries caused to the reader that may result from the reader's use of content contained in this publication, and recommend common sense when contemplating the practices described in the work. Please consult a standard reference source or an expert herbalist to learn more about the possible effects of certain herbs. Introduction. She walks toward the hedge, the boundary that separates the farmer's field from the village, a line that runs down to a wooded area and the heathland beyond. When she reaches the hedge of hawthorn, blackthorn, and dog rose, a triad of wild and native plants that hold ancient and special meaning, she smiles and reaches out to stroke a rosehip. The cool autumn breeze plays in her hair, whipping it around her face as the sun spills its light in waves across the landscape, the sky dotted with huge puffy clouds. It is harvest time, when nature's abundance is at its peak. She feels the strength of the ancestors flowing through her blood and bones, and hears their song in the wind. She says a quick prayer to the ancestors and blesses the land and the ongoing harvest, even as the sound of heavy farm machinery floats upon the breeze. She turns and follows the hedgerow down to the little woodland, a special place that bursts with bluebells in the spring. In this place she stands for a moment, utterly still, listening to the sounds of the spirits of place, the robins and blackbirds, a pheasant squawking, a hawk crying high overhead, riding the thermals. This is the edge, where the hedge meets the wild, where the known meets the unknown. The civilized comes up against the wild. Here, at the edge, is the special place, the in-between place. This is where she belongs. Inviting the power of the ancestors to flow through her, inviting the gods and goddesses that she loves, inviting the spirits of place to join with her intention, she turns 3 times anti-clockwise and sings. Once she has stopped, she knows that she walks between the worlds, that the other world is all around her and she can seek its wisdom and guidance, while testing her courage and her wits. Here she will find the answer to help her in her quest. Here she will find the inspiration, known to the Druids as Ogham. Here is where the magic happens. Here she walks as a hedge druid. Druidry is a deeply fulfilling earth-based spirituality. Western spiritual traditions often differ from, say, Eastern traditions in that they can be a more solo affair. Our mythology is filled with tales of a hero or heroine on a quest, and it is that quest which seems to be a recurring theme. There are challenges and people to help along the way, but on the whole the quest must be fulfilled by the seeker and the seeker alone. With Buddhism, one often has a community, a sangha, a teacher to go to, monasteries and abbeys, and more. Western paganism is a bit different, but fast-growing with events, organizations, festivals, schools, colleges, and more. Perhaps in our lifetime we will see the equivalent of pagan monasteries and abbeys, where the priesthood or those wishing to live a life entirely dedicated to their pagan religion is sanctioned, widely accepted, and has community financial support. However, the point remains that the solo quest has been and most likely will always be central to Western paganism. This quest can be seen in many different ways. It could be a quest to find the true nature of the self. It could be a quest on behalf of another person, or a spiritual quest to find communion and integrate with the gods, a form of mysticism, if you will. Often we are seeking to bring disparate parts of our own soul back together, to find the whole once again, to bring a holistic view into our ever-increasing disparate and isolationist society. When we find the whole within our own self, we find the whole within the community and the world. Druidry is no exception. Druidry is the quest to find our place in the world and to work in the world in balance and harmony. It is being a part of a functioning ecosystem, to learn its ways and find how we too can be a contributing member. We might be seeking the divine in order to build that bridge that allows us to understand how to find our place in the world. Or we might be trying to connect with our ancestors and their knowledge of the world. We might look to the spirits of place or to the fair folk for guidance and inspiration on how we walk in this world and the other world, in balance and for the benefit of all. For the other world is also a part of this world, overlaying it and offering a different perspective on the nature of things. We need this different perspective in order to step outside of our narrow, human-centric perspective, to enable us to see the bigger picture. And so we might quest to the other world as well, to gain this broader viewpoint, finding guides and companions that can provide knowledge and insight for us to take back into this world. What is most important is that one actually begins the quest. So often we can just think about it, contemplate it, talk about it, but not actually do anything about it. We must be bold and take those first steps and then have the fortitude to see it through. Should our paths turn away from our original goal, then we must pursue those if we feel that is the right thing to do. But as long as we are walking on the path, as long as we are actually doing the work and not just thinking about it, then we are on the mythic quest that is so much a part of our Western heritage. Along the way, we will find great joy and sadness, great courage and great fear. We will face those parts of ourselves that we would rather hide away. We will also acknowledge our gifts, talents, and abilities to be able to use them to their best advantage. But we cannot do it if we are not actively engaged on the quest. So be bold, take those first steps and see where they may lead, for no one else can walk the path for you. Great adventure awaits. I hope to share with you in this work the inspiration and knowledge that I have received over the years. May you find the path rise to meet your feet. May you walk it with integrity and honor. Anachvo dukri isana, haurfos do kosiehu. Your feet will bring you to where your heart is. Part 1. Theory. Here is where we explore the theory behind Druidry. We will look at who the Druids were and who they are today. We will look at different concepts and cosmology in the Druid tradition, such as the Awen, the gods, the ancestors, the other world, and more. We look more closely at what it means to be a hedge druid and the importance of the hedge in the tradition. We also look at the festivals celebrated in Druidry, following the wheel of the year as well as the cycle of the moon. We will also look at meditation, prayer, magic, and animism within the Druid tradition. These concepts form the basic grounding of the Druid tradition, the theory behind the practice. Chapter 1. The Druids. There weren't always Druids in the world. The Druids have had their name from the Iron Age onward. What they were called before then we simply do not know. What we do know is that they held a high status in the community, advising kings, divining auguries, healing the sick, and more. The accounts that we have are still rather scarce, however. The Druids followed an oral tradition, believing strongly in the power of memory and recall in order to follow their path. What was written down was done so by often opposing forces, such as the Romans, and therefore we have to take what was said about the Druids with a pinch of salt. I think that it is fairly safe to assume that before Druidry, there was a shamanistic, animistic religion or spirituality practiced here in the British Isles, and even before they became an island nation. From the retreat of the last ice age, when the land known as Doggerland, that connected Great Britain to the continent, became flooded beneath the North Sea on the east coast of England, there has evolved a different people, a different way of life. The people that lived in the British Isles became changed from those on the continent, though they still held very similar beliefs. Sharing an ancient, prehistoric ancestral root, they still continued to evolve and adapt to their surroundings, and so the religion was shaped by the new islands upon which they lived, as all religions are shaped by their environment. One theory is the Druidry evolved from the indigenous spirituality of the British Isles and was influenced by the Celts. There is another theory that the Celts brought Druidry with them as they traversed westward across Europe. With this theory, Druidry did not originate in Britain. There are a couple of schools of thought on that matter. One point of view that meets halfway is that there still continued to be religious practice on the British Isles since the Stone Age and beyond, which then evolved much later into Druidry, with the influence of the migrating Iron Age Celts, an amalgam that eventually evolved to what we have today. In this theory, there is no unbroken lineage of Druidry per se, but an evolution of religious practice much like everywhere else in the world. The Celts may have brought ideas with them that shaped the Druidry of the Iron Age, as other religions today influence modern Druidry, such as concepts from Native American animistic traditions, or even exploring the Indo-European shared roots through the Vedic traditions of the East. Others might say that the Celts came to these islands and brought their fully fledged Druid traditions with them. Neither theory has been proven or unproven, though the former feels more correct to me. The megalithic stone temples and prehistoric monuments were built right up until around 1400 BCE, before the Celts arrived in Britain. It is still debated whether the Proto-Celts, who may have arrived around 2000 BCE, were associated with these temples or not. But if so, then it is possible that a form of Druidry associated with them has existed since before recorded history began. However, opinion is still divided, and many scholars seem to hold that the Celts came to these isles in waves of invasions, who had no recent link to the Stone Age or Bronze Age Britons of the time or to their religious traditions. We have no definitive answers and can only go by our instinct based upon the evidence we have. Druidry historically can be found throughout the British Isles, as well as in other places throughout Europe, such as ancient Gaul, an area that covered a large region of Western Europe during the Iron Age period. It was inhabited by Celtic tribes and encompassed present-day France, Luxembourg, most of Switzerland, Belgium, and northern Italy. It also contained parts of the Netherlands and Germany on the west bank of the Rhine. Julius Caesar and Diodorus Siculus recorded their perceptions of the Druids in the 1st century BCE. From these classical sources, much of modern Druidry draws its knowledge. The Druids were the priest caste of Celtic society, exempt from service in war, among other privileges. Indeed, the image of the wise Druid worshipping in a grove in a forest comes from these classical sources. So, too, of course, does images of burning people alive in wicker constructs and horrible other means of sacrifice. We just don't know what is truth and what is fiction, what is fact and what is Roman propaganda. Christianity came to these shores in the 5th century, and another layer of gloss was added to the story of the Druids. Many earthly energies and powers of nature became canonized as saints, such as the goddess Brigid becoming Saint Bridget. Churches were built upon ancient pagan sites of worship. Some claimed that a form of Druidry merged with Christianity, forming a Christic path known as Culdi. In Ireland at this time, Christian monks began recording the ancient laws, for which we are very grateful. But again, we have to accept that it is a form of differing perspective and religious tradition that they are derived, with its own biases and prejudices. We also have to recognize what they don't say, what they haven't recorded. Much of the Welsh mythology was recorded and written down at this time, and we have to differentiate the older teachings and nature-based ways of being from these Christianized accounts. The 17th and 18th centuries saw the Druid revival, stemming from a romantic notion of Druidry in an era when industrialization of the country was becoming rampant. It was a reaction to the factories as much as a longing to return to the ancient traditions of these isles. Colored by pastoral poetry and art, and led by early proto-archaeologists such as William Stukeley, they jumped to many conclusions while creating a very structured nature-based religion. However, the gods of nature and nature itself are never as ordered as we would like to have them. In more recent history, the 1940s and 1950s, two men, Gerald Gardner and Ross Nichols joined the ancient Druid order, which began in the early 20th century. Between them, they came up with the 8 festivals that are now celebrated in modern Western paganism, largely in the traditions of Druidry and Wicca, based upon their knowledge and research of older pre-Christian traditions, mainly from a Celtic source. Gerald Gardner became the father of modern Wicca, and Ross Nichols became the figurehead of modern Druidry, and chief of the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, OBOD. Gardner and Nichols were good friends and shared many thoughts and beliefs. Hence, you will see many similarities today between modern Druidry and Wicca. An example of this is in the 3 strands of Druidry, Bards, Ovates, and Druids, found in OBOD and other Druid systems, and the 3 levels of initiation found in modern Wicca, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd degree witches. The 8 holy days are shared, 4 of which are ancient Celtic festivals, as well as the honoring of the phases of the moon in most traditions. Much of the mythology stems from British Celtic sources and concepts. There is a similar belief in reincarnation and the afterlife, which is also apparent in both traditions. The list goes on. So how old is Druidry then? Modern Druidry dates back to Ross Nichols in the middle of last century. How long does the spirit of Druidry go back in time? Who knows? A religion is always evolving, adapting, and changing, especially a religion of nature. Nature changes with the seasons, times of light and darkness, and the ebb and flow of the tide. We could follow some of those threads all the way back to the Stone Age and beyond if we wished, but they are only threads and not the whole tapestry. There was a school of thought, which is now changing, that antiquity equated to validity. Yet just because something is old doesn't mean it's right or relevant. The threads of Druidry could be very ancient indeed, as ancient as the first time humans walked upon these lands or older, because the powers of nature are as old as nature itself, regardless of whether humans have worshipped it or not. We must learn all that we can from history, even when it is ever-changing with new light and facts coming to the fore. But we should not confuse antiquity and validity on a spiritual path. Things evolve all the time. Things become outdated, irrelevant, and sometimes even illegal. Modern Druidry is seeing a large increase in numbers, especially since the 1990s and the coming of the new millennium. There are many more writers on the subject being published, and many more different voices being heard. From the late 90s onward, women's voices began to be heard again in the community, for there were always female Druids in ancient times, though during the Victorian era and to the latter half of the 20th century era, men dominated, offering their perspective, their experience, and their knowledge, both academic and experiential. Today we very much have a balanced form of Druidry, where men and women are equally represented, but that hasn't always been the case. Starting with the coming of the Romans and then Christians, women in religion, politics, and many other places have taken a back seat, not holding any authority or power. But today we are seeing the balance being redressed in modern paganism and in Druidry, despite women's power still being under the secular threat from governments even such as our own today. The world stands at a precipice, where the urge to hold on to power without service provides one with the empty comfort of rewarding the ego. Those rewards are sugary little sweets that have no substance, no meaning. They are empty, devoid of nourishment. Only when we take responsibility for all the damage that we have done and seek to redress the balance will we ever survive. Even though we claim assurances from modern science, still we are very afraid of everything. We think we are not afraid of nature, that we have controlled it, but anyone witnessing a tsunami or earthquake knows otherwise. We are still monkeys running around scared for the most part, reacting to our world instead of acting with intention. We react to protect our egos, our sense of self, but only when we realize that there is no separate self, that we are all related will that fear leave us. That is the essence of Druidry. It is connection, being part of an ecosystem, weaving the threads of inspiration, and finding our place in the world, in the here and now, in harmony and with respect. The Hedge Druid. The Hedge Druid is a more recent term that applies to someone who walks the Druid path for the most part alone, using their wit and intelligence, the wisdom gained from long hours of research and practical experience, in order to create their own tradition that is right for them and their environment. The term hedge, when applied to Druidry, stems from the 19th century term hedge priest, which denoted a priest of the Christian faith who did not follow a particular or established tradition, had no church per se, and who preached from the hedgerow. The term was first applied to witchcraft and modern paganism, and popularized by the author Ray Beth. The term then spread to Druidry and became synonymous with solitary practitioners, who were not part of any order, grove, group, or other established sect. Not all solitary practitioners of Druidry would call themselves hedge druids. However, it is a term that is growing in popularity. In this work, I shall show how hedge druidry goes beyond the notion of a solitary practitioner into something that is deeper and more connected to the natural world. The hedge druid is also one who rides the hedge, who travels between the worlds, who works with boundaries and the liminal places where the edges blend and meet. The term hedge riding is a practice found in the pagan community, mostly in witchcraft traditions. It stems from the German word Hagazizza, which means hedge-sitter. The Saxon term is Hagtessa, and both are where we get our word hag. Someone who rides the hedge can straddle the worlds, this world and the other world, to bring back wisdom and information to use in our world, the middle world. We will learn more about the importance of the hedge and also hedge riding in later chapters. Suffice it to say that the work of the boundaries of the civilized world, as well as that which lies beyond the hedgerow, is the world of the hedge druid, connecting and weaving together those threads to shape the world and find balance and harmony with the whole. It is the known world and the wilderness beyond that shapes and informs our earth-based tradition. For me, Druidry is mostly a solitary path, though I do belong to some Druid orders and to networks and celebrate the seasons with a few friends. But the everyday Druidry, the currents of intention that flow through me, my home and the landscape where I live, is my main focus. It is a mostly solitary pursuit. Like learning, I always preferred to do it on my own rather than working with a group, for I found that my concentration was higher and I could have a deeper level of experience than I could with the influence of others upon my work. The day-to-day living of my Druid path is what is most important, punctuated by the celebration of the seasons and festivals with others. Of course, we are never truly solitary creatures, but in this sense I am using the word solitary with regards to other humans. I am never truly solitary, for I am always surrounded by nature and all its creatures every single second of my life. I am always part of an interconnected web of existence. Living this connection, weaving the threads of my life to that of my environment and all that exists within it, means that there is no separation, no isolation. Yet when asked to describe my path, I use the term solitary or hedge druid in the sense that I prefer to find such connection on my own, without other humans around. Why this should be so is perhaps due to my nature, naturally shy and sensitive to noise, light, barometric pressure, and other phenomena. It is just easier to be alone most of the time. It is similar to the path of the mystic or a monastic. The path of the mystic is much the same, a solitary path where personal connection to the divine is the central focus. Some would say that the mystic path is the search for the nature of reality. For me, Druidry is the search for reality within nature, and so the two can walk hand in hand down this forest path. There are many elements of mysticism in my everyday life, where the songs of the land and the power of the gods flow through me, the knowledge from the ancestors deep within my blood and deep within the land upon which I live, rooted in its soil and sharing its stories on the breeze. To hold that connection, day in and day out, to live life fully within the threads of that tapestry is what I aspire to do, each and every moment. Sometimes a thread is dropped, and it requires a deep mindfulness to restore it. But practice helps when we search for those connecting threads, becoming easier with time and patience both with the world and with your own self. The monastic, however, retreats from the world to connect with the essence of the divine. There is a deliberate intention to be separate from the so-called mundane world or secular culture. However, within Druidry, we realize that there is no such thing as mundane, and the duality between the physical and the spiritual is something that is anathema to the tradition. Learning how to be in the world is of great value, even as great value is found in being alone. For some, I'm sure a monastic Druid tradition would be a most agreeable way to live, but for most they prefer to work in the world rather than separate from it, because they understand that separation is merely an illusion. Most non-gregarious Druids would prefer the path of the mystic rather than the monastic for that very reason. The mystic seeks integration, the monastic separation. Yet both have many other similarities. Both seek to release the vice-like grip we have on our sense of self, the ego that we try to protect at all costs. The dissolution of the ego can be seen as at the heart of many Eastern traditions. Druidry teaches us integration, our ego perhaps not dissolving, but blending in with that of our own environment. We don't think less of ourselves, but rather think of ourselves less. The animism that is a large part of Druidry for many helps us to see the sacredness of all existence, and in doing so we are not seeking annihilation but integration. We can perhaps dissolve the notions and outdated perceptions that we have, both about the world and about ourselves, leaving the self to find its own edges and then blending into the world around us, truly becoming part of an ecosystem where selflessness is not altruistic, but necessary for the survival of the system. The flowing inspiration, otherwise known as the Hoeven, where soul touches soul and the edges melt away into an integrated way of being, has always been at the heart of Druidry. The 3 drops of inspiration or wisdom from the goddess Cariduin's cauldron contain that connection. They contain the Hoeven that, with enough practice, is accessible to all. We have to spend time brewing our own cauldron of inspiration, filling it with both knowledge and experience, before we can taste the delicious Hoeven upon our lips. Some prefer to do this with others, some prefer to do so alone. It is easier to quiet the noise of humanity and of our own minds when we are alone without distraction. Notice I said easier and not easy, because again it takes practice. But time spent alone, daily connecting and reweaving the threads that we have dropped, can help us create a wonderful, rich tapestry that inspires us to continue in our journey through life, whatever may happen along the way. Though the solitary path might not be for everyone, having these moments of solitude can be a great tool for deep learning, working on your own as well as working within a group, grove, or order. Sometimes we need to remove ourselves from the world in order to better understand it, and then come back into the fold with a new awareness and integration filled with Hoeven. The Hedge Druid is not afraid to be alone, nor with others, but seeks deep and utter integration in the world. Being a Hedge Druid requires determination in seeking out the ancient and modern lore and finding what aspects resonate within our soul. Not everything ancient is valid today, and not all modern aspects have integrity. We need to take a step back from declaring authenticity when there is doubt, and instead search for validity in our spiritual path. The Hedge Druid learns to walk her path with integrity, with solid research and experiential wisdom. She does the work, in the physical as well as the academic. Our learning is our own personal responsibility, and I hope that this book helps you on your way. Throughout, we will glimpse little snapshots of a Hedge Druid as she goes about her path honoring the natural world around her, filled with wonder and enchantment. She closes the book, her hand running down the front cover, feeling the energy of the words flowing through her mind. She thinks about the history, what the ancients may have seen, what they may have done. She takes in a deep breath and knows that she will never stop learning, whether from books, friends, strangers, or personal experience. She looks out the window and sees a blackbird, a druid daube, alight upon the branches of the elder tree. It begins to sing its evening song as the village settles into quiet. She nods to herself and says a prayer of blessing on her work and research before heading into the kitchen to make some tea.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?